In this video, I'm going to explain how to reapply thermal paste for your CPU. So if you have any cables on your CPU fan, you're definitely going to want to remove those from the motherboard or wherever they're connected first, because you don't want to have to unscrew and then realize your cables are in the way. So get that done if that is associated with your CPU fan. And then the first step to it would be removing the screws. As seen here, you're going to want to remove the screws. Try and do it adjacent, so the top left screw in the bottom right and the bottom left in the top right at the same time, so it's sturdy and you can pull out easier and it won't be wobbly on one side too much over the other. So here we're going to pull out the CPU fan. My screw was locked in there, so I had to get that out really quick. So here I'm going to pull out my CPU fan, and you're going to see there's actually quite a bit of thermal paste all over my CPU, which is good because that was the stock thermal paste and it was on my Kraken X63, I think it was. It actually lasted a long time. I got this last year in July, so over a year of use. And I know you're supposed to use alcohol preps pads or sterile alcohol pads, whatever you want to call them. You can use this to remove the thermal paste. People tend to use coffee filters. That's really good too. You can scrunch it up and rub it against it to get the excess on top, and then use this as a safeguard after. But I don't have that, and I don't feel like going to the store, so I'm just going to use this. It's fine. Still gets the job done. You just want to basically scrub at it and get it off. It's as simple as that. And the CPU is built to be safeguarded from anything moving it, so when it's locked in like that, as you can see, it's not going to move. Don't be too worried about hurting your CPU like that, because I would be worried, but I'm not, because I know that it's locked in place. It's not going to move whatever you do. As long as it's locked in, it's not going to move. So you can do the little circles like I'm doing and get all the thermal paste off as you need to. Once you see that it's squeaky clean, you can go ahead and get your other pads ready for the CPU fan. So on the bottom, the heatsink, that needs to be cleaned too before you reapply. So that's what I'm going to do in a sec. But I realized I need to do the last bit of the CPU because there might have been residue or leftover possible lint or whatever came off at the end. Maybe a little piece of hair, because I haven't cleaned this in a long time and I just cleaned it before, so there is a lot of hair that was around my motherboard. So getting that off, all the visible things. The non-visible particles, they really shouldn't do much impact on anything in your computing because it's almost nothing. So if you have visible hairs, obviously take those off, but we're gonna get to the heatsink here, and you just want to make it squeaky clean, just like your CPU. So I'm getting the leftover things, and I might use a new pad here just to make sure I'm not rubbing any dirty things on it or whatever would happen. But it looks pretty clean. So yep, looks really clean. I'm gonna get started with putting it on after I get the last piece of hair off. Just make sure that there's nothing visibly on there. That's all you want to make sure of. Now applying the thermal paste is actually really simple. The hardest part is already done because you just had to clean it off. That is the hardest part. The next step is just simply making a pea-sized thermal paste onto the CPU, and then you can simply splat the CPU fan on top and it will spread out on its own, And that is the perfect size amount you want. A pea-sized amount is perfect. You don't need any less, you don't need any more, but it never hurts to go a little more. It hurts to go a little less though. Keep that in mind. So as we put this in, I'm gonna press. As I know it's in place, I'm gonna press. But I realized that my screws weren't in because I had trouble with the bottom right before. So I'm reapplying all this. I'm gonna simply just make sure these are all tightened, as you should do too. Ready to go. Just need to screw it in and then call it a day. Or reapply the cables, of course. So once you screw it in, you are pretty much good to go. The only hard part was that you were handling such an expensive product, and putting pressure on it seems a little scary, but I promise it's fine. Especially for the heatsink, there's nothing that can go wrong. It's just a heatsink and you're just cleaning it off. So make sure these screws are really tightened in, and you don't want it to like be wobbly at all or anything. That would be bad. That means the CPU and the heatsink of the CPU fan are not in contact enough to spread out the thermal paste and make a nice connection. So once you find out that they're all tightened in as much as you can, not too hard because it will damage the motherboard, of course, although there's nothing really important under the screw, it's just the hole. Just want to make sure that you take care of your motherboard. And that's about it. You just need to re-plug in the cables and you're pretty much good to go from here. My CPU is working just fine after this. Nothing went wrong. Nothing really went wrong during the process, so that makes sense. Hopefully this helped you out. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.